Welcome to another Lawyers React. We are doing a landlord-tenant dispute. This is the plaintiff was a former tenant claiming that the landlord was snooping on her and going into her room unannounced. So let's see what happened.
This is the plaintiff, Ulitha Flowers. She says she rented a room in the defendant's house, and a creepy guy would go into a room when she wasn't there to snoop around, which is not okay. He would also lounge around in her room on the couch, which was very uncomfortable for her because he didn't live there, and he saw her in her bra. This was very alarming to her. She moved out and is now suing this guy for the $10,000 she feels she's owed.
All right. It's probably jurisdictional limit, 10,000.
This is the defendant, Peter Chang. He says that a strange plaintiff smoked in her room, which was a big no-no. And when he confronted her about it, she accused him of invading her privacy.
Okay, she rented a room. I wonder if there were...
suing him, and is one of those professional rent scammers who...
Okay, so she rented a room. It would be interesting to see if there were other people renting rooms. I thought it was the landlord that was going in. It seems like it was maybe one of the other roommates were going to her room. And the landlord is accusing her of being a professional tenant, which professional tenants exist. Professional tenant is like a layman term for tenants who move into places and know a lot about landlord-tenant laws and tend to have an upper hand or advantage and game the system in their favor. Take with that opinion as you may, but let's keep going.
He's afraid of her $10,000 lawsuit. Guess what, lady? He's not scared. He can't wait to tell his side of things to the judge.
No, he does not look scared.
A snoop. The defendant filed a countersuit for $3,775 for unpaid rent, smoke damage, and leaving a mess behind.
Ruining a rental agreement. I don't know what that means. Breaching a rental agreement is okay, but ruining a rental agreement, that's a new one.
Parties, please raise your right hand. You see to come to order, please. I love it. Litigants have been sworn, Your Honor.
Thank you, Doug.
You're welcome.
All right. Ulitha Flowers, you are suing your landlord for $10,000,
Yes.
Which you say he owes you in back rent, lost wages, security deposit, and lawyer fees. Because according to you, he violated your privacy. You have a counterclaim against her because she breached, according to you, her 3-month lease. So you found this room. You rented a room in a house, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and why were you renting this room?
I took a job with Stanford, and I lived in Sacramento where I resided, and I took a job in Stanford and
Stanford University?
Stanford University Healthcare.
Okay, what were you going to do for them?
Healthcare IT, electronic medical records.
Okay.
And so when I got the job, I had to find, a place. I needed to move from Sacramento to...
Because the ride from Sacramento would be how long?
The ride there is probably about 4 hours, so it wasn't feasible for a drive with traffic. So I needed to move. So what I was looking to do was to rent a room because I have a child that was graduating high school.
Right.
So when I researched Peter from Craigslist, it was to rent a room until the month of June.
And then he had originally wanted first and last month's rent, and that felt ridiculous with such a small lease. So he accommodated you and just made it first month and a $500 deposit.
Yes, ma'am. We
All right.
discussed that
So
first online. And
who else was...
Okay, so this is the first time that I've known the jurisdiction of a case, which is California. California is a very pro-tenant state as far as landlord-tenant laws go. So Craigslist is actually a pretty common way to find leases or places for rent, not leases. But Craigslist can be a very dangerous place for the simple fact that there could be a lot of fraud, like tenants posting units that they're not allowed to post. I had a client who a tenant moved in and the unit across the hall was vacant, and then they illegally posted that unit on Craigslist, leased it to someone, had the locksmith come, change the locks, then gave that person the keys, and then they moved out, stopped paying rent, and then there was this unknown person in this, what was thought to be a vacant unit. That guy paid a ton of money, ultimately moved out, cooperated, and avoided going to the eviction court. But you have to be very, very careful with finding apartments on Craigslist and making sure that the person is legitimate. There's a lot of ways to do that, but this is a reaction video, not an informative video on how to lease. So I will spare you that detail.
In the house?
At the time, no one. And when I discussed with him what my plans were, he told me that his wife, every now and then, may use one of the rooms upstairs. I asked him, was he going to be renting out the home to any men? Because I was not going to be living with any men. I was looking for a home with just women. Okay. He said, absolutely not.
Okay. That is kind of a double-edged sword. The wife coming and going and staying in her room, I mean, that's up to the landlord. If she's just renting a room, she can't really dictate what, can be done with the rest of the rooms. For her to tell him, I won't live in a house if you're going to rent it to other men, that's difficult for the landlord, because the landlord could be accused of discrimination for denying an application based on sex. So he might say, yeah, whatever he needs to say to get her in, but it's a gray area. I don't think he could even enforce that, because he could then get in trouble for denying an application based on someone's sex, simply because she doesn't want to live in a house with men. So he probably should have not made that promise. But anyways.
His wife would be there from time to time, and he was not going to allow any men in the house with her as well.
All right, and so who else was going to live there?
He, at that time, had a renter that was going to come and look at the place, which was going to be a lady. She was going to rent the downstairs room.
And did she?
She did. Her name is Sally, and she did end up renting it.
You move in March what?
We started the lease on the 13th. I moved in probably around, it was right before work. I want to say March 14th in the morning.
Okay, and the lease is supposed to go for March, April, and May up to June 13th, right?
Up to June 14th, yes,
June 14th. All right, and then what happens? What goes on?
On March 23rd, I hadn't even been in the house, for a couple weeks. He had already started kind of showing, I took it as him being just an older gentleman. It's his home, but he was kind of like always around.
How?
In his garage. If he wasn't in the garage, he was just around,
No, I don't know. I need you to tell me how.
Well, he was in the garage. If he wasn't in the garage, he was in the living room.
Do what?
He said that it was his things. He said it was his home. So
what would you say to him? What are you doing here?
Yes, and I said, sir, I can't live with you. And he told me that he had a lot of things. He said that because we originally talked about me taking over the entire home, right?
Pump the brakes. She is renting a room. So unless there's something specific that says he's not allowed to come, it is his house and he can come around. Now, if it starts to infringe on her quiet enjoyment of the house, that could be an issue. That's more of a question of fact. It would depend on how much information she has about how often he was there and what he was doing. But it's one thing to talk about, hey, eventually I'll take over leasing the whole house. And at this present time, she's not leasing the whole house. So you can talk about that in theory. I'm going to, in the future, lease the whole house. But in the present moment, she's only renting a room. So she has rights to that room and probably to the common areas. But the rest of the house, the landlord's able to access. She's not renting the entire house to the exclusion of the landlord. So that is a huge problem that I see when landlords rent houses and they rent out rooms. It becomes really tricky because tenants might not like each other. In this case, roommates, might not like each other. They're tenants to the landlord, they're roommates to each other. And the fact that they're staying in the same house. So that creates animosity. Then there's a lot of turnaround in the sense that people come and go. So there's not a lot of stability. And then with houses, there's always like a different feel. Like if you have an apartment, you're renting your apartment and that's it. When you rent a house, it's a huge space. And so while you might be only renting a room, you have the sense that this whole house kind of belongs to you. Mostly because the bathroom's probably not attached to the room. You might have access to the kitchen, the laundry area, maybe the garage. So while you're renting a room, it needs to be very specific what you have access to, but you're not necessarily precluding the landlord from being in the house or using the property by simply renting a room.
So he said, well,
meaning that you would get to rent it
exactly
and move your family, and your family is your mother and your daughter
for $3,050 is what he discussed with me.
Right.
And so when I saw him there, I assumed it was because he had a lot of stuff there. So I said, okay, well, I told my mom, I said, well, maybe he's trying to get some things situated because 3 months is gonna come
I'm
real
sorry, if you
quick.
saw him sitting on a couch, you know he's not getting things situated. So did you see him sitting on a couch, or did you see him moving stuff out? Which is it?
I saw him sitting on the couch talking, well, he came and talked to me, basically, just, just there, kind of.
Is he there every day?
So, okay, so let me finish. So when I went there
Well,
on March,
first answer my question. Is he there every day? When you say he's always there, is he there every day? Did you mean to
a
say
total of 4 times is what I have.
4 times you saw him there during your tenancy? All right.
Yes, ma'am.
So the first time is
That's
when?
not a lot.
First
She
time
was there
on March
several
13th.
months.
When I moved in, I
Okay,
said,
that's when you're moving in and
Yes, ma'am.
signing leases. He better be there because he's signing leases with you, right?
after he got done signing the lease, I wanted to get in. I wanted to get acclimated into the home. He stayed. I said, I have to go to work, Peter. He said, okay. I said, I'll take a lift, Peter. He said, well, it's okay. I'll take you. So I said, fine. So I let Peter drop me off at my job.
Oh, that was big of you.
At that point,
So that's the first time you said. When's the second time you see
the
him?
second time was on March 23rd,
Okay,
which
so-
was a Saturday morning.
And that's the day of the painting.
That's the day where he sent me a text message saying that he was actually in the unit. I was outside by the pool of the community. And he sent me a text message saying, are you around? Because I'm going to call painters. And I said, well, yeah, I'm going to be home today. Wasn't a big deal. I said, I'm thinking, okay, what time? He says, I'm already in the unit. I've already started painting. And I said, well, wait a minute.
What's
I
the
need to
unit?
go in the room and I need to get my things.
room.
There was no notice. There
Were
was
you
no.
taken aback that he was?
Absolutely.
Were
It
you
was a
offended?
Saturday. I was greatly offended. It was a Saturday. I'm just relaxing.
That's
Can you
not
explain
cool.
why your text to him was, oh, awesomeness?
Because he said, I'm going to be painting. And I said, what?
Because you were happy that he was going to be painting, because that's your text back to him. It's,
My text back
oh,
to-
awesomeness.
My text back to him about, oh, awesomeness was because he was going to paint. Not that you were in the house that day.
Why didn't you just tell him this today doesn't work for me?
I
Because
said, Peter,
yeah,
can I come
right,
in the
but
house?
today may have worked for Sally, or today may work for his wife and the unit he still has. But if it doesn't work for you in your room, you could always say, hey,
I did.
no, today's not good, do it tomorrow.
I did, ma'am, but because he
You
was
said that? You said today's not good?
not in a text, he was in the home.
He says, Yuli, are you home? We are doing painting today. To which you respond, hey, Peter, yes, sir, I'm home. Painting what areas? To which he responds, the whole unit. Touch up. To which you respond, okay, awesomeness. Thanks, Peter. What
Yeah.
time? To which he responds, we are painting right now. Living room and Sally's room. When you are out, we will work on your room. To which you respond, can you let me get my room together first? To which he responds, I'm here, yes. There's not a thing about this that says, who do you think you are? I demand notice. You're just happy as heck that they're going to paint the room.
Can I say something?
Can you answer what I am asking you?
I'm
Because
not-
this
I'm
is
sorry.
important, because you brought a lawsuit for 10 grand.
I'm just
So
not
I'm
sure
going to
that-
cross-examine you.
I'm
I
just
want
trying
to
to say-
understand what was so unpleasant about that. You had a lawyer write that man a letter about the violation of privacy rights and all this other stuff. How was this right here a violation of privacy rights? Just say, hey, today's not good for me. You need to give me notice if that's how you feel.
The violation of privacy, ma'am, was in his lease, he said that he would give me a 24-hour notice.
So if you don't like it, if now's
Okay.
not good for you.
So in the lease, it might say specifically how much reasonable notice is. By statute, there's a few different ways that it's been edited over the years, but reasonable notice is usually 24 hours for notice, and obviously unless there's some sort of emergency. But a tenant can waive notice and agree. So you can go, hey, I'm here, can I paint your room? And the tenant can agree. Even if there's not 24-hour notice, a tenant can agree to waive that notice, which appears, this is what the judge is arguing. It appears you waived the notice and you were actually excited about the fact that your landlord was going to be painting your room and he was going to, give her the time to get her room situated so that it could be painted. But she could have said, no, you didn't give me notice to enter my room. And she could have, asked for that enforcement. I know I want you to give me proper notice. In this case, for the text messages, she seemed okay with it. That's what the judge is highlighting here.
Yes,
Which
ma'am.
I could understand.
Yes, ma'am.
Just say, hey, no, don't do my room today. You're going to have to do it a different day. I'm not ready. You needed to.
Unfortunately, I went in the home and we had this discussion. I did not think this was going to go this way.
So
I did
you had a
continue
discussion
text
different from what
messaging.
I'm reading?
Ma'am, I'm not trying to portray anything. Basically, what I'm saying is what I did on my private time should be my private time.
Sure.
He
So
wrote in the
just tell the
lease.
truth. Tell me
I'm
the truth.
telling
What
you the
went
truth.
wrong with this? Because you
What
broke
went
the
wrong
lease.
with this is
You
that-
ended up breaking the lease, and I'm trying to understand why you broke the lease.
I'm gonna
And
finish.
then come to court to sue for 10 grand.
I'm gonna finish and tell
So
you exactly
right now,
that.
what I would like to do is hear from him, and I'll be right back with you. I'll be right back with you when I am ready to be back with you. When was the first time that you realized that she was unhappy?
On the 19th of April.
Okay, and what did she say to you?
Well, because she's paid the rent in cash, which I don't like it. So I have to write a receipt to her.
Okay.
So I went to her room. Then I saw that the light is on, the fan is on, everything's on, and the room is a mess. I didn't say it, the room is a mess, but I just said, I called her, I said, come on, you cannot leave all the lights on when you're away. So I called, then she get really upset. She said, I violate her privacy.
Okay.
All the time. She's very nice.
Until that moment.
Yeah.
Now, was there a different problem? Because she had mentioned earlier that she had expected that come June, she would be able to move in with her mother and her daughter. Tell me about that.
Okay, now, you see, we communicated on March the 10th. It's a Sunday. Then when she said she would come on Wednesday, on that day, she said maybe she would rent the whole house after the
It's
3 months.
before she moves in that she said that?
Right. We thought, I said, maybe, we think about maybe, we agree
So
on the
you say
price.
maybe.
Maybe, yeah, but not written, okay?
Right.
So then on the 15th, she moved in, okay? Then on the 19th, she was really upset. Yeah, but I think before that, I wrote a letter to her, said that given more thought, I should not really rent the whole thing to you because we really need it.
Do you have that letter?
I do.
Can I see it?
I have it here.
Okay, and let me see your copy too. I want to make sure we're looking at the
Yeah.
same thing.
Yeah, I wrote the letter because I don't want to face it because it's
I
embarrassing.
bought this property in 2013 to cut down commuting time from San Jose to Hayward. Same as your but he bought the property. Therefore, it does not make sense for us to rent the whole unit. In other words, your stay in this unit is until mid-June when you find a place for you and your family. That is when the problems began. Did you not decide to break the lease over this?
No, ma'am.
Why did you decide to break the lease according to you?
I decided to break the lease on April 19th when he texted me and told me that he was in the unit again for the third time and told me that he went into my bedroom, and that was beyond of.
Okay, so that's where I see the issue being on the landlord side. And this is where it's tricky. They keep calling it the unit. A unit typically is used in the sense that maybe it's a detached guest house or it's an apartment. In this case, they're using unit interchangeably as the house and as the bedroom. And that's where it gets a little tricky because the bedroom is what he needs to have permission to enter or give a 24-hour notice for. It's the permission I'm talking about. Or, she approves it without the notice, like what happened earlier about the painting. So they keep using unit interchangeably, and this is where I'm like a little annoyed by this whole thing because the house itself is not like one unit. She is renting the bedroom, which is a unit. But the whole house, he's able to come and go out of because, again, she has the exclusive right to the bedroom, but he might have access to the whole house. Again, I haven't seen the lease, so maybe the lease looks different. But if you're renting a room, it's typically you have the exclusive right to use the room, and then you have permission to go into the guest areas. But it's been noted numerous times in this whole thing that she's only renting the room. She's not renting the rest of the house. So he can go into the house. I mean, I'm not saying why he can't go into it. He just can't go into her room without permission. And that's where the landlord kind of gets in hot water because it appears he might have seen the lights on from a window and then went into the room and verified, yeah, it was messy. Well, you would only know if it was messy if you looked through the window or you opened the door and looked into the room. So you shouldn't be obviously looking through windows, but you want notice to enter to the room. So that's where she does have a valid point, which is you went into my room without asking. That's what he's supposed to have notice for. He's supposed to post the notice or let her know, hey, I want to come in. Can I come in your room? Now, if he had seen the lights on from outside and noticed that her car wasn't around, maybe he could have texted her, hey, are you home? No, I'm not. Okay, well, I see that your light's on. Please don't keep the light on. As you know, it's running electricity and it appears to be that you're not here. Did you leave that on an accident? Coming around. You don't even have to go that far. You can just say, hey, please be mindful to turn lights off if you're not going to be in the room. Or, turn the lights off if you're not going to be in the house. Something like that. But you can't just walk into the room without giving a proper 24-hour notice. And additionally, landlords cannot abuse the 24-hour notice thing. You can't just be going into units consistently without really any valid reason. That can be, deemed potentially harassment, depending on why you're doing it and how often you're doing it. So yeah, I do think that she has a genuine beef for that entry, which apparently is not the March one where he's painting. This is in April. Okay.
For me. There was no reason for him to go in.
Did you go into his bedroom to leave the rent?
Peter told me to put the rent money on his desk.
And so he walks into your room, which I understand that you would find creepy or whatever, and he puts a receipt instead of slipping it under your door. Did you leave your door closed or open?
My door was absolutely closed, and I wasn't gone for several days.
So what he should have done is slip the receipt under the door. But what he did instead was put it on your desk. You make it sound like you rifled through your mentionables.
In my opinion, when you have a lease that says you're going to give someone a 24-hour notice.
Yeah, I know, but you're acting like you rented this whole place. And then your landlord is popping up in your bathroom.
Exactly. That exactly is my point. She's making arguments kind of loosely based on, like, you guys seem to have this loose relationship. You could go into his room, but he went to yours. I don't know. If you want to rent a bedroom, stick to your own rules. Stick to your lease. If the lease says you have to give 24-hour notice, then give 24-hour notice to go in. If it's a receipt, I agree with the judge. Slip it on the door, tape it to the door. Text her, I left the receipt underneath your door, or taped it to your door. Or, hey, would you like me to go in your room and leave the receipt? Or, if it's in the house, maybe he could have left it on the kitchen countertop, because it seems, she probably has the ability to go in the kitchen. Maybe that's a common area she has access to. So there's different ways he could have gone about it. But you want to be very, very careful, because, this judge seems to be kind of okay with it. Another one might not be. So if the lease says 24-hour notice, you adhere to the lease.
Room in a place where your landlord and his wife stay. But can I ask you something? Because this is the reason I am a little upset. When I ask you, is this letter the reason that you want to leave? And you look me right in the eye and say, absolutely not. I would have stayed to the end of June, right? Are you being as truthful about that as you are about the rest of your testimony?
I had nowhere else to go. I'm absolutely being truthful.
I would definitely have stayed there, Okay, so now I'm going to read your text to you. Yuli, I'm in the unit. Feel smoke in my room, also the garage. Condition is no smoking. I count the money. It's $12.75. I will write you a receipt. You answer, I don't have any reason to be in your room, Peter. And again, never smoked in your house. Thanks. However, I do need to discuss with you your email and my leaving your property. Peter, you know for a fact that you offered for me and my daughter to take over the entire house.
Yes.
In June.
Yes.
Now, 4/11, you sent an email saying that I can't. I'm not financially prepared to try to pay you my home in Sacramento and save in less than 2 months to move. I will be leaving your property the first week of May, which is my right.
That is the day I received his email. So when he was texting me, I was responding.
Okay, so she has conflicting testimony and the judge just busted her. She has a lease to rent a room in this house until some specific date in June. Maybe it's mid-June or end June. I can't remember. He talked to her and she goes, hey, maybe I might want to rent it in June. So they have nothing in writing. For these agreements, they have to be they don't have to be, but they should be in writing. But they have a writing. And I bet you that lease says that any changes to it have to be in writing. For leases less than 12 months in California, they don't have to write anything for 12 months after due. But landlords, by now, know to put things in writing. So he has a lease that they've been referring to, or he has in his hand that he's been showing, that she's going to rent from March to June. Then they have a conversation, sidebar, hey, I'm thinking about moving my daughter in, maybe her mom, who seems to be next to her, and taking over the whole house in June. Okay, I'll think about it, is what the landlord has. Then the landlord thinks about it and goes, it doesn't make sense. We have our house here. We should just stay in the house, talks to his wife, and lets her know, hey, this is April, so 2 months before her lease is up, because she has a March, April, May, June. I don't know how to count that. It's just a 4-month lease. So he goes, hey, we're going to stay. We're not going to take you up on that. So there was no agreement between them that she was going to take over the house in June. It was an idea that they discussed, and he said he would think about it, and ultimately he changed his mind. But they had no agreement, and up until that point, she was only renting a bedroom. And then she gets this email, hey, we're not going to take up your offer to rent the whole house. We want to stay, and it doesn't make sense for us. So then she gets mad, and she goes, well, I'm moving out. That's where she breaks the lease, because there was no agreement for her to rent the house. It doesn't appear that there was an option for her to rent the house at the end of her lease, nothing like that. It was a conversation they had. He considered it and he decided against it. But that doesn't give her grounds to break the lease so far. Maybe the tide will turn here in a second.
Exactly what I said, which is, now that I know I can't rent the whole place, I'm not going to respect my lease. Not, you're a creepy, pedophile who's hanging out in my room and violating my privacy. It's this. To which he responds, that is not your right to violate the agreement. To which you respond, Peter, it was agreed, just not in writing. Which I learned a very valuable lesson.
Here it is right here, where we talked about the roommate moving in as well as her.
So the reason you want to leave in the beginning of May is that you can't rent the whole place.
No, ma'am.
You come in and go as you please, which is very uncomfortable.
Yes.
As soon as he tells you no, you can't breach a lease. So it's exactly how it goes down is like this. I can't rent the whole place, and you told me I could, so my last week is May.
No, ma'am.
No, you can't. You can't violate the agreement because we have a 3-month lease.
No, ma'am. Peter violated the agreement several times.
You come and go as you please, so I'm violating the lease. That's the reason. Once he tells you, no, you can't break the lease. See, at my job, I got to make sure of two things. Number one, I have to look at what you're describing, and I have to agree with you that gives you a right to walk out on a lease. That's the first thing I got to do. Then the next thing I got to do is figure out whether I'm going to agree with you that he owes you $10 grand, because it's not just you broke your lease and you don't want to have to pay it. You want your security deposit back, but you also want any rent you've ever paid back, even though you were there for 2 months. You want $6,000 in wages. What's that about?
I gave you everything. There's my letter of work. I made $57 an hour, and I lost my job. And
I'm sorry, you lost your job. Why?
I lost my job because I could not commute from Sacramento to the Bay Area.
Why didn't you just rent another place then?
Because I didn't have the money, ma'am.
When did you lose your job at Stanford?
I lost my job on May 10th.
Well, of course you don't want to stay until June, because you no longer have a job that you were going to be working at. Why would he have to pay you?
No, I couldn't leave until June anyway because my daughter graduated high school.
Can I just ask you a question? What did he do to violate your rights other than leave a receipt in your room?
Ma'am,
Oops, sorry.
First of all, I had my underwear out, my room.
Okay. So she had a lease until June. He says, in June, when your lease is up, I'm not going to give you the whole house. It doesn't make sense. We're going to, wife and I are going to stay. So then she goes, I'm moving in May. At that point, from what I can tell, she's still employed. And she goes, I can't afford to move. Well, it's interesting to me she can't afford to move, but she knew she had to move because June is when the lease was up. And then even further, she was actually hoping to pay more money by leasing the whole house. So she would have to have that money to come up with every single month. And then presumably, I guess, pay for her daughter's moving expenses, maybe her mother's moving expenses, because I think at that time they were not living with her. So moving expenses would be involved. Maybe her mom and her daughter would be contributing, but who knows? So it doesn't make sense that I financially have to immediately move, even though her lease is for 2 more months, which would have gotten her through the school year, arguably, is what was going on. Is she needed to stay there for this, this portion of the school year. Then in May, she lost her job, but in May 10th, she lost a job, but April 11th, a month before, she unilaterally noticed that she was going to be moving out in 2-ish weeks. So how is it that he caused her to lose the job if she was living there and could live there through June? And then she lost a job a month later after she unilaterally made the decision to move out. That, to me, does not track.
I washed clothes before I left to go to Easter to spend with my mom. No one ever thinks that because you have a landlord that he's going to go into your bedroom, So I left my things, I washed my clothes just like a normal woman would. When Peter went into my bedroom, into my bathroom, that for me was that was the creepiest thing I've ever felt in my life because it was unnecessary.
You
For him,
led a very blessed life, if that's the creepiest thing you've ever felt in your life.
Well,
you
I'm
have no
sorry.
right to walk into a room that somebody's renting. Just don't do it. That is
Yes.
how people want it to be. One time
Yes.
the guy puts a receipt, and you want me to believe that you are a victim of the worst form of violation possible, instead of what I'm reading with my own eyeballs.
No, that's
now
because
you also want the
wow.
lost wages for the time in May that, according to you, the reason why you no longer have the job at Stanford is because you couldn't get to work on time. Now, why don't you wake up earlier and get to work on time?
I have to leave at 5 a.m.
Why don't you leave at 4:30 and get to work
There's
on
no
time?
train, ma'am.
You lost your job over
There's
it.
no train.
Then
There
why
was
don't you
no
take
way.
the $12.50 you weren't paying for June and go ahead and pay it somewhere else?
It's not that easy to just find a place.
Okay,
That's
but
simple.
you know
If it
what?
was,
You know
I
what
would have
doesn't
done
happen? That is a you problem.
Welcome back to the People's Court. Harvey Levin here. So if you rent a room from somebody else, somebody else's home, do you still have a right of privacy?
Yes.
Yes and no. I guess you have the right to privacy to an extent, you know?
To what extent? Think about that. What do you say?
I mean, yeah, but it's their home, so if they don't like you doing something, then
Can they dictate what you do because it's their home and you have no rights there?
Yes, a little bit, but it's still an invasion of privacy. Stay out of my stuff, stay out of my room that I'm gonna lock.
And you have that right even if it's their house.
Well, you're renting a room.
Going
That's
inside the courtroom.
Now, Mr. Chang, let's discuss
that was
your
misleading, but
counterclaim.
okay.
In your counterclaim, you are suing for June $1,275. I understand that part.
Yes.
But you're suing for $2,000 for smoking and drinking. What on earth does that mean?
What?
You see, the agreement is no smoking, no drinking in.
No drinking.
Nowhere in
Yeah,
there.
in the advertisement.
Is that the advertisement? I want to see
Yeah,
the
in the
advertisement.
advertisement.
No drinking is a tough one to enforce.
No smoking, no drugs.
Maybe no
/
intoxication in
alcohol.
common areas might be, but
I would never rent that place. It does say no smoking in the advertisement. Is this
Then
the
also
advertisement?
in
I never smoked in this house.
According to her, she wasn't smoking in the house. She was smoking outside. So what evidence do you have that she smoked inside?
smoke in the house because I smell it.
That's it? That's your evidence?
Yeah, I smell it, and
Now,
also
you also are suing for $500 because mess left in room. What mess?
yeah, that's a mess.
Okay.
You know,
That's from his painter.
yeah, and then the room is a mess.
Well, show me the proof of what is a mess.
I don't have anything.
Okay, I can only
Hey,
rule on what you put in front of me.
gotta have proof of that.
According to her, that's paint from the painters. It kind of looks like paint.
Okay. If you're going to allege property damage, you need move-in photos, move-out photos to compare. Even if you're renting a room, move-in photos. And then if it's truly a mess, move out photos of the mess. And there's all sorts, there's notice of leave of abandonment. There's different kinds of notices that you have to give if they've left property behind and vacated. So doesn't have photos, that's not going to hold up. That's already going to be an issue for him.
So how would that be her? So that entitles you to get $500 from her. I want to know what school all of you are going to and learning the things you're learning. That this would entitle you to get $500 from her. This, okay.
Well,
You and everybody just stop talking. You have on your side of the table $500 from her security deposit, correct?
yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so he kept that, which would be
So I just got my.
how do we get out of this thing?
Entire apartment clean for $19.
Okay,
Seriously,
great.
$19.
No. Okay.
On your counterclaim against her,
Yes.
I find that you're entitled to the June rent. That putting a receipt on her desk and asking her not to leave the lights on in this situation, in this case, where your wife is essentially her housemate, did not so egregiously violate her rights as a woman that she gets to breach the 3-month agreement. I believe that the reason she wanted to breach the 3-month agreement is because she was no longer being able to bring her family into that place. And she's, I believe, using all of this being you putting a receipt on her desk as an excuse, okay?
Yes.
I find that you are entitled to the $1,275 of rent, minus the $500 you already have, so she has to pay you $775. You do not get $500 for a mess in her room. You do not get $2,000 for smoking and drinking that you have no evidence of her doing inside the house. On her counterclaim against you, you don't get $900 in legal fees. You do not get that because you're not winning. I find that you did not have a right to not only not stay, but also get all your rent back for the last 2 months. I think that you have
So
some
he can violate your rights. He is allowed to win a
No,
case.
you know what he's allowed to do? He's allowed to put a receipt on your desk and ask you to leave the lights off. That's what your housemate is allowed to do. Verdict for the defendant in the amount of $775. If you don't get it, you are never going to get it. So there is no point.
Dokie dokie. So another emotionally driven one. A lesson for landlords: don't just enter premises without giving a 24-hour notice or having permission. That permission should be in writing. The reason being, if it's not in writing, you're going to have a tough time proving later that they said, okay, go ahead. Renting rooms, especially where you live with people, I've seen that go terribly wrong many a time with people. I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm not steering you away from that. But you have to be aware it's a completely different dynamic. So you have to be mindful of the fact that her stuff is in there, that she's renting there, that she's renting that room. So you don't go in that room without permission. If you have to give a receipt, wait till they get home, post on the door, slip it underneath the door, leave it in a common area, something like that. But don't just walk in. Don't do that. You're going to get in trouble. So that is my lessons for the landlord. Oh, move in, move out photos, which I've said 1,000 times. For the tenant, it's very hard to break a lease unless you have some really, really good evidence. Usually it's like a major habitability thing that can't be fixed. If you're experiencing domestic violence, you could break a lease for that. If the landlord is heavily, documented, impacting your ability to have quiet enjoyment of the premises, okay. But you have to have very good evidence, and it has to be, systematic in the sense that it has to be repeatedly, a lot of the times, all the time. In this case, she didn't have enough of it. And the evidence tracks, she got upset that he said in June, we're not renewing the lease. And so she prematurely broke the lease that she didn't have a right to break. So that's what got her in hot water. Just because you have a calculation in your mind of what you want does not necessarily mean you're going to get into court. I think the judge was right about the damages. It didn't seem like there was any damages to the unit. He does get to keep the $500 security deposit and credit towards the rent. I'm a little confused why it's only June rent and not May rent, but he only asked for June rent, so that's probably why May rent wasn't thrown in there, but it appeared that she moved in May. So she would have been on the hook for 2 months, but not sure why that didn't get addressed. Probably because the landlord only asked for the June rent. So that being said, this is another one of people's courts, surprisingly in California. I don't know where these are. I thought they were for some reason in Florida. But I hope you enjoyed that. There are a list of videos that I have on my channel. One that you might want to watch is about the landlord-tenant dynamic. I will link that somewhere above. I think it goes over there. And that, thank you for checking in, and I will see you on the next one.